Hey, good morning. My name is Jim Walker. I'm the Federal CTO at UiPath. We've been excited this morning. Great conference, good turnout. It's another good job. We were at ACT-IAC last weekend in Philadelphia, and another great show. The next panel you're going to listen to is a power panel. They're doing something that none of the other 56 agencies are doing. I'm happy to introduce to you Siri Ira. He's responsible for RPA and intelligent automation at Guidehouse, one of our partners. And if you would give a round of applause for Siri as he mics up and gets ready to come up.
So my name is Sri Iyer. I'm the director of AI and automation for Guidehouse. I'll actually start with an interesting story I had. I've been doing AI and automation for years now. One of my first clients was actually someone, it was an agency, I'm not going to say which agency, but they were working in Excel a lot. They had a lot of transactions that they were doing in Excel, and they asked us to automate something. And this person was basically looking at an Excel document every day, has numbers in these cells, and then had a physical calculator next to his desk where he was typing in the calculations and then putting them back in the Excel. So really my first automation moment was just teaching him that there's such a thing as formulas in Excel. So that was the sort of first jaunt into automation for me. So I'll start with just talking about my personal journey. I'm a US Army vet. Before I came to Guidehouse, I was leading a lot of AI and machine learning projects for Lockheed and Raytheon, really kind of focused on the intelligence community. And at Guidehouse, we kind of see AI and RPA as really like complementary technologies. I kind of joke that AI or RPA is kind of like the gateway drug to get to AI, and it's really that bridge that gets agencies and organizations kind of set up for success, so they get their data in order, get sort of all the things you need in place to get AI going. And so, Erica Thomas, who's on this panel, she's actually at her agency really kind of pushing that same sort of bridge to that machine learning as well. So, we've had a lot of success at Guidehouse with using that strategy. We have about 30 projects right now across about 20 different agencies in the federal government, all focused around AI, intelligent automation, and RPA. And we've just recently, it's been really focused around UiPath mostly. We've got some Blue Prism, but we recently just set up a commercial COE as well that's using Automation Anywhere with a team in India that also complements our US team as well. So it's been a good success story for us over the last 3 years, but there's been a lot of challenges. I think like big or small, whatever you've got a small automation that's running on a desktop versus something that's running unattended at scale in the cloud. You're always going to have to have certain things in place, and I think collaboration is really the key component for that. You can't do any of this in a vacuum. You have to work with other people. All these bots have to connect to other systems. You need to talk to other stakeholders. There's a lot of collaboration that goes into making a program successful. And really the three people on this panel know that story the best and can really convey that. So I'd like to just go ahead and introduce them to you. I'll start with Erica Thomas. Erica Thomas works for the Office of Secretary of Defense Comptroller. She's the current program manager of the OUSD Robotic Process Automation Initiative and co-leads the DoD's RPA consortium. Outside of the DoD, she's an active champion for the federal RPA community of practice and co-leads the use case, process selection, and automation sharing practice area. Prior to her current role, she served as the team lead for DoD's financial management reform efforts and as a senior accountant in the Business Integration Office, leading enterprise-wide procure-to-pay initiatives and Data Act reporting compliance. All told, Erica has over 14 years of DoD financial management experience. I'd also like to introduce Christine Gex. Ms. Christine Gex has successfully led the development, deployment, and sustainment of robotic process automation programs for 2 federal agencies. Currently, she leads the RPA program for the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army of the Army Financial Information Management. As a leading innovator within Army Financial Management and Comptroller, FMNC, Christine leads the Department of Defense RPA consortium areas within GSA Federal RPA Community Practice. Prior to her position, Christine was the Chief Information Security Officer at the NASA Shared Services Center, where she spearheaded efforts to provide CAC PIV-level credentials to the federal government's first RPA robot. That last point is actually a huge milestone. That's something that we're struggling a lot with at the DoD. So, I think it's a key thing that has been sort of success story there. And then I'd also like to go ahead and introduce Ms. Nicole Hyder, who's an Army veteran and graduate of the Army's Management Analyst Intern Program. She has worked as a budget analyst at the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Financial Management and Comptroller, Headquarters, Department of the Army, Budget Formulation Division. You can tell in the DoD there's a lot of long agency names. She recently was at the Washington Headquarters Service Accounting Division, where she championed and implemented the use of robotics process automation across the defense agencies' initiatives, execution and formulation systems. She currently works as a program manager for the Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller Program and Financial Control Division. So please give our panelists a round of applause, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to our first panelist. So I'm actually going to start with a video from the Washington Headquarters Service, the DAI program that Nicole spearheaded. So I'll go ahead and show that video. It's of one of the bots there. Nicole, do you want to give any commentary on it before we started?
Hi, everyone. Nicole Hyder. Thank you guys for coming out, and thank you guys for taking the time to listen to what we have to share regarding our experience with RPA today. The first video that will be shown is one of the first RPA automation that was developed for WHS. It basically takes, when we switched from our existing financial system into a new financial system, we had something called a whole lot of unmatched disbursements, which were dollar amounts that went somewhere, needed to go another place, so on and so forth. Long story short, it was a lot of work on the analysts. So the analysts had to do the research, find out where the money needed to go, where it could go, where it couldn't go, so on and so forth. And then they had to manually enter those transactions into the system and then go and run a report to see if it did what they needed it to do. So this demo is going to show you basically how we kind of channel that down to having the analyst go ahead and do the research, pop it into a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, but then have the RPA solution enter the information into the system for them. So that minimized the amount of errors that would take place, because if you make an error, that's going to show up on the report, you got to redo it again, so on and so forth. So it minimized the errors, and it basically brought WHS's number of RMDs down, or UMDs down from probably like 19,000 to about 7,000 or 8,000 within a 6-month span. So. Oh, he's not talking.
The bot launches and logs into DAI just as an everyday user would. It opens the payment entry form. The bot reads data from an Excel file that is required to update each UMD. It now searches for the first purchase order. It checks to make sure the payment amount matches what is included in the Excel file. If so, it opens the payment information form and updates all of the required fields. In the first 3 days of production, the bot was able to clear over 980 UMDs. The bot then finalizes the update.
The lovely British accent as well helped a lot for that.
We got to work on the ending to make it a little bit more.
Right. Some fireworks or something, I guess.
So Nicole, I'll turn it back to you if you want to just talk a little bit more about WHS and some of the other stuff that's going on at your agency.
Okay. So one of the questions a few of the questions I was asked to answer include how and when did WHS get started with RPA? We started with a demo from one of the agencies, or from a software team. It's the UiPath folks, and I'll just put a disclaimer out there that UiPath is not the end-all be-all, and WHS is definitely open to the other solutions. But that was the demo that we actually got. It was also one of the softwares that was already being used in DoD, so it was easy for us to get it added to the standard list of software that was authorized for our agency. And that's one of the huge issues with adding any software to any DoD anything, is getting it approved. So we did go ahead and start with UiPath to get it on the list. And so we had the demo. As they were doing the demo, my boss kept saying, well, whatever needs to be done, Nicole is the one that has to do it, so she has to be able to do all the pieces. and we had company, so I couldn't say, wait, what? So I'm listening, and so I actually went out and I took the UiPath training. They gave like a 90-day free trial, which was very helpful because I needed that information to be able to write up the paperwork so that we could get it added to the list. So I actually did that at home on my own personal computer, and we were able to get it added to the list. So we got the software installed after that, probably within about 90 days. And so as a natural resource manager, I grew up a budget analyst, so it's all about cost. How much is this going to cost us? So we just started with like two of the software licenses that would allow you to develop RPA solutions. So we started off with what they call Studio in UiPath. And so I had one at my desk, and a couple of other folks who had also taken the training had it at their desk. And so that's pretty much how we got started. We built that first one that you saw. That was the first one that we developed and deployed, and we just kind of continued to build from there. Another thing was how did we get leadership involved, or get leadership to push or agree for us to be able to do this within our agency. The FM community as a whole, and you guys have probably heard, it's moving towards more of a more analytics. Instead of all the hand jamming, you got clerks to do certain things. Well, the entire DoD FM community is moving more towards analytics. And so with that being said, our leadership at WHS at the time, they were, pressing forward with following the guidance of higher leadership to try to spend more time doing analysis than entering the numbers into the system to get the results. So RPA was an excellent opportunity for WHS to move forward in that direction. So you're spending more time doing analysis because the bot can move a lot faster than a human can, and it gave time back to the analyst. And so that was basically how leadership got involved and was very forward moving on entering RPA into the financial community at WHS. Some of my lessons learned, I learned about what Erica was doing through our audit folks, which was very helpful. So my lesson learned is get audit folks involved very early. Also socialize what it is, make sure that they understand that it is not the Arnold Schwarzenegger is coming to do my job, but to let them know that it's to enhance how they're doing what they're doing. And I think the socialization part of that and how we did the implementation is what gave us the success that we had. We also required that the end users or whoever we were developing a bot for, we required that they go out and take the training. So they knew what a bot would do, what it wouldn't do, so on and so forth. So they gave us intelligent processes that we could replicate. Partnering with OSD Comptroller, that's Erica Thomas sitting here to my left. So Erica, kind of the way the structure is, I'm one of like the lower agencies below Comptroller at the time at WHS, and I had licenses and I had processes because I was the system administrator for both formulation and execution, so I'm managing these two major systems. So as I said before, my boss said that I had to do everything. So I was like, that's humanly impossible. So when I met Erica and found out what she was doing with her team, I had licenses and I had processes, but Erica had developers. And so we kind of pooled our resources to where I put her with the analyst that had the functional experience, the functional knowledge of what that robot needed to do, and her developers did the development. And so they worked hand in hand with each of the different analysts to fine tune those robots. If something happened, Erica's team would come back out and make whatever changes, but it was a very, very, very successful partnership. We also ensured that we, it saved the government or DoD as a whole money because you don't have multiple agencies doing what Erica's team is doing. So it kind of gave the smaller agencies that probably would not have been able to afford to have the extent and the success that WHS has had. It kind of afforded them the ability to move into RPA. WHS's path forward, they have since included their lower agencies and are now allowing them to do RPA as well. So we're out of the pilot phase. It's really, this is what it does, this is how it works. And so there are more agencies in WHS that are now using RPA. And with that said, I will transition over to Erica.
Great. So no more demos, right?
No more demos.
Yeah, I think, do you want to do
No,
another
no,
demo?
no.
I realized we are standing between you and lunch, so
Yes.
we all agreed
Right,
as a
right.
group
So
that
we're
we
gonna
would
try
try
to
to
get
move it
us-
along as
Yeah,
I
quickly
hope I
as
didn't
possible.
talk too fast.
We're going to try to get us back on track. So again, I'm Erica Thomas with Comptroller. Just quickly for my own interest, because I usually do this, how many folks do we have from DoD in the crowd? Okay, relatively small today, great. So from an OSD Comptroller perspective, we started looking into RPA and potentially how it could be used within financial management about a year ago. And originally we started looking at it under a broader contract that we had issued just to look for the opportunity space related to just general reform within financial management. RPA was one line, it was like 1 FTE, 1.5 FTEs. It was very small, it was just kind of just exploring what was going on. And that was about, again, a year ago when we first started getting started. One of the first things that we did is well, who's doing what already in the space within DoD? So we did kind of an informal scan across the network, and there were already programs that were stood up. You know, Army with Christine already had a program stood up. We quickly recognized that WHS already had a pretty big interest and already had a list of potential opportunities. They just maybe didn't have the developers on staff to get them done and get them past the finish line. So we did an informal scan and kind of figured out, what do we want our opportunity space within OSD Comptroller to be from an RPA perspective. And what we decided, at least initially, and this can always change depending on leadership's direction, we decided we're going to have 3 main focus areas. So our first one is selfishly, do we have automation opportunities inside of Comptroller? And you heard from Elizabeth earlier talking about she had an idea and she was very happy that we had a team that could automate her idea, and that was an internal Comptroller process that we moved out on. So that's an example of our first focus area. We have more. Now, typically the return on investment, and I don't like to use that term even though I keep using it, the labor hours redirected is typically what I like to stick to. For those internal ones, they're smaller than what we potentially could have with some of our other opportunity spaces. So the second area that we're focused on is the fourth estate. So from an OSD Comptroller perspective, we typically are more involved in the fourth estate organizations. In part because, you know, the MilDeps don't like us to get too much into their business, and we respect that. But for fourth estate, particularly DAI. So DAI is an Oracle-based accounting system that 26 different agencies in DoD are using. And what we would like to do, particularly in that area, is how do we develop automations that we can span and scale to all 26 smaller, typically smaller, entities that are using this accounting system. So WHS is one of those, which is why we were so happy to partner with Nicole and her team. She already had a list of opportunities. She already had processes mapped out. She gave us laptops with the software because it was readily, we easily identified that RPA, the opportunity is there. So again, I started this contract, I had 1.5 bodies. I think I stretched it and I started forcing movement. I said, I don't want to talk about RPA for another 6 months. Let's start doing it. So luckily, again, through Nicole and her team, they gave us laptops. So we have procured our own licenses and our own computers now, but I think we still are using at least one of WHS's
We'll give it back. assets.
It's a drug deal.
Right. So it was a very good partnership and quickly showed kind of progress for RPA for the department. And again, the intention, even though we built the initial automations related to DAI for WHS, the intention is that we're going to scale those to the other 26 agencies on DAI. So as we're building those, we're not building them particularly for WHS. We want them to be built in a universal way that they won't require any or very minor changes when we deploy to other organizations. And we've been having roadshows and meetings with some of the other agencies on DAI, and there are, I think, at least 4 relatively decent-sized organizations that absolutely want the automations, and they're in the process of getting those deployed to those. So we're starting that. We still have room to grow from our scaling perspective, but I think that's going to be a really good opportunity space for us. The third area that we're focused on is universal automations that just make sense for comptroller to be involved. So one of the things that we noticed when we were doing the informal scans in DoD of who had already been doing what was there was already duplication happening, which was really kind of sad. It's understandable. DoD is so big. It's very hard for us to be organized and share everything that's going on. But what we'd like to do is where there are universal automations, maybe there's automations pulling documents out of a DoD enterprise-wide system to support audit requests, which is definitely financial management related. How can we develop an automation that could be used by everyone versus all the individual organizations, including the MilDeps, going out and building their own? So where it makes sense for us to get into universal automations within DoD, we're definitely moving in that direction. We also have established an RPA Center of Excellence, and really it's an RPA IT platform. And again, we originally chose UiPath. That's not to say that that's our end-all be-all solution, but it was one that was already approved on our networks, at least the studio and the attended versions. The orchestrator, we did have to get an ATO, so I do acknowledge that. But it was easier to do the pilots getting started. We set that up, and we started that path pretty early on as well because of Army. So Army you had a mature program. I think it was like a year old by the time we were even looking into it. And you guys were looking into your orchestrator options, and they needed server space. And I think there was a challenge there, so they reached out to Comptroller. We just happened to be all on the same network, and we had it available. So this was another opportunity that was kind of thrown at us, and it's a great partnership. So now we're standing up, or have stood up, an orchestrator platform where, Army is leveraging it, Comptroller is leveraging it for our internal automations, WHS is leveraging it, any of the other additional agencies that potentially want to join the platform. We're in the process of kind of building and scaling that, so that's exciting news. And I do have a picture on that later, so I don't want to get too far ahead. The only other thing I would say on this slide is, again, without partnering initially to get out of the door, out of the gates, it would have been much harder. We would have had much longer delays in terms of showing progress and successes in finishing projects. So for us, collaboration and sharing and being open to partnering has been really, really important. And our program and Comptroller would not be where it is without groups like WHS and the Army. And what we're trying to do from a Comptroller perspective, and I think other organizations as well, I know Army, Christine does this as well, is kind of how do you foster the collaboration and sharing across particularly DoD, but even the federal government. I think there's a lot of automations that can be shared or maybe could be used to generate ideas. So I usually joke, if you can beg, borrow, and steal from others, let's do that. If it makes sense, we don't necessarily have to start from scratch. So we are trying to do that through a variety of avenues. On this slide, you see a table of DoD automations. So Christine and I co-lead the DoD RPA Consortium. And what we do is we go out on a quarterly basis and ask the DoD communities to voluntarily report, what do you have going on in the RPA space? What are your automations? And these are voluntary data call results from that. And again, we make sure we report our own because we're trying to foster that collaboration. So we need to make sure we're kind of eating our own dog food on that and making sure it's encouraging others to report as well. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Just kidding. From an automation sharing perspective, I think the only thing I'll touch on here is I did shamelessly put the link to the DoD RPA Mill Suite site at the bottom, but it sounds like there's not too many DoD folks in the crowd. It will be limited to DoD government employees unless you're a contractor sponsored by your DoD military employee or your client. So from an automation sharing perspective, I think we all know it's swivel chair activity, any manual if-then repetitive type processes RPA is an opportunity space for. One thing I'd note here from a lessons learned, it's not always about the volume. It's not always about the labor hours saved. I think you heard Gerard mention that earlier this morning. For us, we have automated things that I think in retrospect we might not automate now, or we would still automate because they're related to maybe a strategic initiative. So the labor hours saved is not significant, or the labor hours redirected is not significant. But we still have done those because there's other significant benefits to those. And then lastly, so this is a picture of the orchestrator platform that we are standing up or have stood up in Comptroller. And again, we have multiple tenants. So any of the automations that we have deployed for Comptroller, we have a separate tenant for that. Army has a tenant. Again, DARPA, we're hoping to get connected soon. Navy and Air Force, they're also in the process of getting some of their organizations connected to this as well. And we're learning as we go. So different networks, DoD has a lot of them, and so there's different firewalls and proxies that we have to address and move through. So hopefully we'll be building and maturing this platform, but this is a good example of partnering and how this is going to really benefit, I think, DoD in helping organizations move out on RPA. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christine.
All right. Thank you, Erica. So I won't get in the way of lunch, but shorten up you've heard pretty much probably a similar flavor all throughout the morning. So I won't try to repeat anything. I just will talk just briefly about our program because I'm pretty proud of the program. We've had very significant results. We currently have 16 processes, saving about 25,000 hours, and we have about 17 processes in the queue currently under development. But for the most part, we have a very good governance, outreach, everything that comes with a good program. And with that being said, I'm hoping that I just really kind of want to talk about and show you a demo that's something that I'm very proud of, because it kind of shows the robustness of what robotics process automation is, and it's on the Joint Reconciliation Program. So for those of you that don't know about the program, this is something that's required from DoD. Erica probably can speak to it much more eloquently than I am, because I'm not the one that has a finance background. I'm more from an IT background. So with that being said, I'll say that there's a lot of balances, a lot of repetitive manual process that goes into this activity. We currently, when we first started out, phase one started with 100 fund centers, and then we increased it to 900, and then we eventually scaled this particular automation enterprise-wide to all 2,500 fund centers in the Army, and that's really huge. But what was very significant on phase 3 is that we had to almost take a step back and restructure what this automation looks like. At first, when we started, we just took that standard operating procedure and we automated it. Phase 2, we had to get a little bit more crafty because we did this all over a 48-hour time saving period, and normally that would take about roughly 3,500 hours with other users doing this. So pretty significant lift for us, but a good accomplishment. So that being said, let's see if I can give you a little bit of what this looks like. So how we restructured this was we had to break it down into modules, and the heavy lift is in module A, where they're pulling the reports. And the only reason why I'm showing you this diagram is so you can get a sense, so whenever we start playing the automation, you can see how it's interacting. So it will interact with this database down here, and it's going to then go to module B, and then it will do C. So we'll talk through that a little bit. All right, so here's where they're going to start pulling. This is where our heavy lift is. So we put majority of our bots, about all 13 of them, on this particular activity on A. Whoops. I'm hoping that it's going to play for us.
Yeah, let me see if I can get it working over here.
Sorry. There you go. Thanks. So hopefully you can see that. So you'll see them pulling down the particular, what they need to focus on. Maybe not.
Sorry, I was trying to make it bigger.
That's okay.
Or not.
Doesn't like it.
No, there it goes.
Okay. So this particular database, so it's pulling the database. What you'll start seeing is once they choose the activity that they're supposed to focus on, it will start going into our accounting system, and it will pull the information that it needs to. And we have about, I think we started out with 12 bots just particularly on Module A, because this is the biggest part of getting all the data out of the system. Hopefully it's still moving. There we go. So what you're seeing is actually what users would go through pulling these reports, as you can see. And really we've cut the video down because it was a very intense, it's an intense process for all the users. And just imagine, almost 2,000 people across the Army going into this particular system and doing this activity. Pretty significant amount of work going on. All right. So you also, the other thing that we added this last phase was our legacy systems. So this is where you'll see it pulling the submodules out of that particular system. The other reason why we chose to put the database in there is because a lot of times when you're trying to pull 14,000 some reports, is what it ends up being, is you need to know what percentage is complete throughout that process. Especially when you're shifting all of that work to the bot squad, it was, we needed to know how we can turn around that for our customer in 48 hours. So. All right, so let's move on to B. And you might have to do your magic again, maybe?
All right.
Yep, you will. Sorry. So what B is going to do is it's going to pick up, once it has a full packet and it has a successful packet, it will parse, B will start processing those packages with all, and it'll start applying, whoops, I hope I didn't mess it up. There we go. Again, so you'll notice that it's picking the users, because we're still in attended mode, users are having to select what we wanted them to process. But then once they've selected that, it will go into the database. It will actually determine what needs to be processed, whether it, they'll pick up all the ones that have passed and then they'll go and they'll do the Excel manipulation and it'll apply all the data rules that need to be there. So what you're seeing in the back, the reason why you're seeing nothing is because it's actually pulling that database at this point to see what it needs to process. Now it's applying the rules. So it's about 6 to 7, I guess it's about 8, almost, let's see, 8 queries altogether. But then it ends up being like 14,000 reports.
Christine, do the modules automatically kick off?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Between modules?
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
If they automatically kick off, and it's pretty sweet because, like I said, and if you can hit C one more time,
yeah,
that'll be awesome. So C basically takes and folds it all together, then what we would actually then take and put out on a SharePoint. The only step that we automated the step to actually move it to the SharePoint. However, we've chosen to back off that automation a little bit because of the size of the data. It becomes a problem for us. So we don't, this also is applying the metrics and the thresholds, and it bundles it up and off it goes. So as you can see, it doesn't take too long.
Oh, that's good.
So there you go. And that's the end. I guess I gotta get better at the end.
They usually
But-
We need some sort of
drop
firework
abruptly.
display
I know,
or something
right?
at the end of these spots,
It
right?
mainly, yeah, sorry. So with that being said, the partnership with Erica has been tremendous. Infrastructure is our problem. Credentials is still a challenge for here in the DoD space. As from a NASA perspective, yes, we followed the human process and we gave our bots cards. Yes, we did that. We didn't quite make them take the training we as alluded to earlier, but we still had to check that magic box because we wanted them to be tracked, because that's in accordance to what you'll see in policy now, which is what 1917, is that what it is, or to reverse it, whatever OMB put out. But that's the reason why we chose that path. Was it the cleanest path? No, but it allowed NASA to get there within less than 6 months, and we're still challenged with that from a DoD perspective today, because this is an awesome automation that we showed you, that the team put together, and really a lot of good process owners that latched onto this, but we really can't see that huge savings until we get into that unattended mode and we don't have to have any human intervention. So that's where we're headed. It would be nice to get there a tad quicker.
Awesome. So I'll just underscore that for those of you not familiar with the DoD, collaboration is really difficult in that environment.
Right.
The fact that even us, as we're going through different agencies, every single component within DoD, Army, Navy, has to get their own accreditation for UiPath. They have to get their own approval to use it, and it's not shared across the board. So the fact that the three of you were able to collaborate, and especially the consortium, like that is a huge step forward for that organization. So just wanted to underscore how critical this collaboration was. So I think we just have a few minutes left, so I want to just turn it over to see if there's any questions in the audience, and kind of go from there. Thank you.
I'm Tony Bunton with HUD. You talked about actually you producing a CAC for the bot. Have you looked at ways to emulate that? I know Defense Logistics Agency has done a little bit of work in that area.
So we have received, the Army has received one unattended credential from cyber. But the problem is we still have that issue with actually pairing that virtual desktop with the identity to actually turn on the desktop. So that's where the struggle comes in. And DLA has been, I don't know if they're in this room, but they've been very successful at applying unattended credentials. They have that very well worked out. But what you'll find here with this panel is that DLA their RPA program is ran by their CIO shop, and that is a huge help. What you're probably seeing on this side of the house is that you're coming from a finance background. So even if I take my NASA, put my NASA hat on, it would be I came out of a CIO shop. But coming into the Army, 16 months ago, it's difficult, right? Working just in a finance shop, not having that access to the CIO world really on your side. So.
Yeah, so we have seen in DoD most of the RPA programs that are being stood up, they're not being run in-house by CIO shops,
Right.
which really you need that expertise to get past some of these things. Right. When you talk to the DLA folks, and again, their program is run by their CIO shop, they'll say the policy and the rules already exist to go out and do this. Well, when you have RPA programs that are being stood up by HR or financial management or whomever, and they don't have that expertise, it gets a little bit kind of overwhelming. And we are trying to improve kind of the partnerships that we have within DoD for those different RPA programs with DoD CIO at the high level to address those credentialing and potentially even reciprocity for getting software approved in DoD. From an overall perspective, because when we do the informal polls, and again, they're voluntary to those that are part of the DoD RPA consortium, So far in DoD, the only software that's being used to date, we have Blue Prism, I believe, installed on the Air Force side, and I believe everyone else primarily is using UiPath. I think Automation Anywhere might be getting into this space shortly, but we are kind of limited in terms of what we're using today. And we're hoping to get the DoD CIO to help with that as well, to potentially open up additional avenues to try a variety of products.
Right. Because it's not so much that the policy says you cannot, it's more, it doesn't say you can on a DoD side. So it's just interpretation of that security paperwork.
So I'm an Air Force, retired Air Force colonel, cyber guy, so I understand all these issues, and I'm working for the CIO at HUD, standing up our RPA environment, et cetera. So I'm frustrating the people that actually want to get bots in production, because I want to go back and make sure our policies are in place, or at least enough to get things moving. If you don't mind, one of your slides you showed an organization orchestrator in multiple environments. Mm-hmm. Is that a actual depiction of your organization? Did you have one orchestrator and multiple environments as tenants? I think that's the way it works.
Yeah, so we have currently one orchestrator installed on a server. We're not in the cloud yet, but we hope to get there. And we have individual tenants set up within that one orchestrator platform. Now, again, we are learning as we go, so we stood up one initially, but we have recognized that in the near term, we do need to stand up at least one more environment so that we have true separation between actual execution and development and test. So if you saw the picture, and I saw some of you taking pictures of it with your phones, you'll see that under each tenant, there were kind of 3 separate blocks. I think it was development, test, and something else. And right now, again, yes, they're separate in that one tenant, but that's not true separation from an IT perspective. So we are recognizing that we need to stand up a second instance to take those and separate those, and also that'll help us as we potentially want to migrate to newer versions. We have come to quickly realize that people get very attached to their automations, and if their automations stop working,
Right.
Elizabeth is smiling because this literally just happened the other week, they get very upset. So what we definitely don't want to do is, if we're going through a migration to a new version or something happens related to that, we can have a separate platform, a true development and test to get that up and running, to have minimal impacts to our actual process owners. You're welcome.
So to go back to the beginning of your question, the unmatched disbursement demo that you guys just saw, so the analyst that runs that, we actually at WHS copied her CAC. So she can't open doors or anything with it, but she can actually now, as she's developing that spreadsheet, the bot can be running, on her machine. So she can, at first, she could only create the spreadsheet, and then she had to wait until it runs, because it had complete control of her system. Now she can be building, it's running, and she's saving even more time. So that is something that you can probably implement before you get to the unattended state.
Right.
She can. Oh no, because she can run the bot from home.
Yeah.
And so I think she gets credit if she leaves and runs it overnight. And they have all kinds of ways to encourage, motivate, and hope that people will
So
grab onto this and move forward. So yes.
Good point, because we have, one of our lessons learned was definitely take your laptops home, because you never know when the power's going to go out in the building and you can't get in for the whole day, or if they shut down the whole street. That actually happened to us, so we found ourselves going over to the Pentagon to get loaner laptops so we can make sure we met our customer demands, because a lot of us are still on that very limited infrastructure that is not ideal when you come out of a CIO shop.
All right, well, I don't want to keep everyone from lunch, but please thank our panelists. Can give them a round of applause for